In the vast and tumultuous expanse of the Warhammer 40K universe, countless mysteries linger in the shadowy corners of its rich history. Few are as profound or as enigmatic as the tale of the Old Ones, the ancient and godlike architects of life across the galaxy. Revered as the creators of countless species and feared for their unmatched technological prowess, the Old Ones were beings of immense power, able to bend the fabric of reality to their will. Yet, despite their grandeur, they vanished from the galaxy long ago, leaving behind only fragmented whispers of their influence and a galaxy embroiled in endless conflict. The departure of the Old Ones is a question that echoes through the ages. Why did these beings, who held such unparalleled mastery over the cosmos, abandon their creation? Were they forced into exile, retreating from some unimaginable threat? Or did they simply achieve a level of transcendence that placed them beyond the confines of the material universe? The absence of the Old Ones has left a void that countless powers have sought to fill, each attempting to assert dominance in a galaxy that still bears the scars of their legacy. Understanding the Old Ones requires a journey deep into the ancient past, long before the rise of the Imperium or the awakening of the Necrons. This was an era when the galaxy teemed with vibrant life, nurtured by the Old Ones' advanced technology and psychic mastery. They were not merely builders of empires, but shapers of entire ecosystems, weaving the strands of life itself into intricate patterns. However, their story is not one of unbroken triumph. The rise of their greatest adversaries, the Necrontyr, would trigger a catastrophic conflict that would forever alter the fate of the galaxy. The War in Heaven, a cataclysmic struggle between the Old Ones and the Necrontyr-turned-Necrons, is often cited as the pivotal event that precipitated the Old Ones' disappearance. This war was not merely a battle of armies, but a clash of ideologies, technologies, and powers beyond mortal comprehension. Yet, the War in Heaven is but one chapter in a saga filled with intrigue, betrayal, and the inexplicable. The reasons for the Old Ones' departure remain obscured by the mists of time, shrouded in the myths and fragmented records of those who came after. This video will delve into the mystery of the Old Ones, unraveling the threads of their story through 10 distinct chapters. Each segment will explore a facet of their enigmatic existence, their identity, their creations, their conflicts, and the enduring impact of their absence. We will examine the key players who shaped this tale, the preconditions that set the stage for their rise and fall, and the far-reaching consequences of their departure. At the heart of this exploration lies a question that continues to haunt the galaxy. Will the Old Ones return? For those who believe in their eventual resurgence, the implications are both exhilarating and terrifying. What would their return mean for a galaxy still struggling to understand their motives and their legacy? Could they restore balance to a war-torn cosmos, or would their arrival herald a new era of chaos and destruction? In this prologue, we set the stage for a journey through the ancient past, examining the echoes of a civilization that shaped the galaxy itself. As we move forward, we will uncover the secrets of the Old Ones, their greatest allies and enemies, and the enduring mysteries that surround their fate. The answers may lie hidden in the stars, but the story of the Old Ones is far from over. The departure of the Old Ones from the galaxy is not a singular event, but the culmination of a chain of tragedies, betrayals, and insurmountable pressures. To understand how such a powerful and enduring race began their exodus, one must delve into the intricate web of events that unraveled their once unshakable dominion. Their retreat was not a decision made lightly, but rather the result of forces they could no longer counter, even with their vast technological and psychic capabilities. The first signs of trouble arose as the Old Ones expanded their influence, spreading life across countless worlds. Their mastery over the warp allowed them to manipulate reality itself, creating species capable of thriving in a variety of environments. However, their ambition to create and shape life brought unintended consequences. As they seeded the galaxy with sentient beings, the warp began to change, influenced by the emotions and psychic energies of these nascent civilizations. Once a tranquil and stable dimension, the warp grew tumultuous, a seething storm of power that reflected the fears, hopes, and conflicts of the galaxy. This growing instability coincided with the emergence of their greatest adversaries, the Necron-Tyr. Initially a mortal race shackled by short, agonizing lives under a dying sun, the Necron-Tyr's bitterness and envy drove them to seek vengeance against the Old Ones. The Necron-Tyr's pact with the C'tan, star-eating entities of unimaginable power, transformed them into the Necrons. This newfound alliance granted the Necrons immortality, but at the cost of their souls, as their organic forms were stripped away and replaced with necrodermis shells. The Old Ones, once secure in their dominance, now faced an implacable enemy armed with the horrifying power of the C'tan. The war in heaven erupted, a conflict that spanned millennia and consumed entire star systems. The Old Ones, masters of psychic warfare and creators of biologically and psychically gifted species, deployed these creations against the Necrons. They relied heavily on the Eldar and other psychically attuned races, crafting them to be living weapons in this desperate struggle. Yet, despite their efforts, the tide of war turned against the Old Ones. The Necrons' resilience, coupled with the devastating might of the C'tan, proved to be too much even for the Old Ones' advanced technology and intellect. As the war dragged on, the Old Ones found themselves increasingly cornered. The instability of the warp, exacerbated by the emotions and strife of the sentient species they had created, turned against them. Warp entities, later known as the First Demons, began to emerge, feeding on the psychic energies of the galaxy. The Immaterium, once their ally and tool, became a hostile realm filled with malevolent beings that sought to enter and corrupt the material universe. The Old Ones were not only besieged by the Necrons and the C'tan, but now faced threats from the warp itself. The war reached a critical turning point with the shattering of the C'tan. Betrayed by the Necrons who had grown weary of their enslavement, the C'tan were broken into shards. Yet this act did not bring respite for the Old Ones. The Necrons, now free from the influence of their former gods, turned their full attention back to their creator's ancient enemies. The Old Ones, already weakened by the prolonged conflict and the chaos of the warp, began to falter. As their creations fell into disarray and their strongholds were overrun, the Old Ones faced an impossible choice. They could remain and fight to the bitter end, risking complete annihilation, or they could retreat, preserving their knowledge and essence for a future when the galaxy might be ready to welcome their return. Choosing survival over extinction, the Old Ones initiated their withdrawal. They sealed many of their gateways and disappeared into the void, leaving behind only fragments of their once great civilization. Some theorize that the Old Ones did not leave the galaxy entirely, but instead retreated to hidden sanctuaries, perhaps in dimensions beyond the reach of mortal understanding. Others believe they fled to distant galaxies, seeking refuge far from the chaos they had inadvertently helped create. Whatever their destination, their departure marked the end of an era and the beginning of a dark age for the galaxy, one where their absence was deeply felt but poorly understood. The exodus of the Old Ones from the galaxy was shaped by the interplay of various factions and forces, each with their own motivations and actions that contributed to this monumental event. Understanding these key players is essential to grasping the complexity of their departure and the far-reaching consequences it had on the galaxy. Each faction, from the Old Ones themselves to their allies and enemies, played a pivotal role in the unfolding drama. At the center of the narrative are, of course, the Old Ones themselves. These enigmatic beings, believed to possess godlike intellect and unparalleled mastery over biology and psychic energy, were the architects of much of the galaxy's life. They were driven by a vision of a harmonious cosmos, filled with thriving civilizations living under their benevolent guidance. Yet their methods were not without flaws. By creating countless sentient species, they unwittingly introduced chaos into the warp and sowed the seeds of their own undoing. Despite their wisdom and foresight, the Old Ones were not infallible, and their inability to foresee the full consequences of their actions led to their downfall. Among the most significant allies of the Old Ones were the species they engineered as tools of war and guardians of their vision. Chief among these were the Eldar, a psychically gifted race designed to be the pinnacle of sentient life. The Eldar's connection to the warp made them formidable opponents, capable of wielding immense power in battle. However, this same connection made them vulnerable to the warp's growing corruption. Despite their loyalty to the Old Ones, the Eldar could not prevent the unraveling of the Old Ones' plans, as their own eventual hubris and emotional intensity would contribute to the instability of the warp. Other species created by the Old Ones included the Crocs, the precursors to the modern Orcs. Engineered to be resilient and brutally effective warriors, the Crocs were intended to serve as a countermeasure against the Necrons. Unlike the Eldar, their connection to the warp was minimal, allowing them to resist its corrupting influence. However, their chaotic and unpredictable nature often made them difficult to control, and their role in the larger strategy of the Old Ones was ultimately limited by their inability to act in a coordinated manner. Opposing the Old Ones were the Necrontyr, whose hatred and envy for their creators drove them to align with the C'tan. The Necrontyr's transformation into the Necrons marked a turning point in their war against the Old Ones. As soulless beings of living metal, the Necrons were immune to the psychic powers of the Old Ones and their allies, making them devastatingly effective in battle. The Necrons' hatred for the Old Ones was fueled not only by ancient grievances, but also by the influence of the C'tan, who sought to consume the life energy of the Old Ones and their creations. The C'tan themselves were entities of immense power, formed from the energy of the stars. Initially worshipped by the Necrontyr as gods, the C'tan exploited their followers, transforming them into tools for their own purposes. The C'tan's hunger for the life force of sentient beings made them a natural enemy of the Old Ones, whose creations were seen as a rich source of sustenance. However, the C'tan were not a unified force. Their internal rivalries and eventual betrayal by the Necrons led to their fragmentation, a development that had profound implications for the balance of power in the galaxy. Another key faction in this drama was the Warp itself. Though not a sentient entity, the Warp became a significant player in the events leading to the Old Ones' departure. The psychic energy of the sentient species created by the Old Ones caused the Warp to become increasingly unstable. This instability gave rise to the first Warp entities, which fed on the emotions of sentient beings. These nascent entities began to influence the material world, creating a new layer of danger that the Old Ones could not fully counter. Finally, there were the remnants of the Old Ones' creations and their successors. While many of the species engineered by the Old Ones were devastated by the conflicts of the war in heaven, some survived and adapted to the new realities of a galaxy without their creators. These survivors inherited the tools and knowledge left behind by the Old Ones, using them to carve out their own paths in the galaxy. In some cases, their actions would perpetuate the legacy of the Old Ones, while in others they would betray it entirely. The interplay of these factions and forces created a complex tapestry of events that ultimately led to the Old Ones' retreat. Each contributed in their own way, whether through active opposition, unintended consequences, or the relentless march of time. Together, they shaped the fate of a galaxy that would never again witness the presence of its first and greatest architects. The departure of the Old Ones from the galaxy was not the result of a single event, but the culmination of a series of catastrophic developments that overwhelmed even their immense capabilities. As architects of the galaxy's sentient life, the Old Ones sought to create a harmonious balance across the stars, but the convergence of external threats, unforeseen consequences of their actions, and the destabilization of the warp ultimately forced their retreat. These interconnected factors reveal the fragile nature of their grand designs and the tragic inevitability of their downfall. The initial spark for the chain of events leading to the Old One's exodus was their unparalleled ambition. By manipulating the warp and mastering the genetic code, they seeded countless worlds with intelligent species, many designed to serve as loyal allies or custodians of their vision. However, the rapid expansion of intelligent life had unintended consequences. The emotions and psychic resonance of these beings began to accumulate in the warp, a dimension that mirrored and amplified the energies of the material realm. What had once been a stable and tranquil resource for the Old One's endeavors turned into a roiling, unpredictable force. The warp's transformation into a chaotic and dangerous entity did not happen in isolation. The Old One's long-standing rivalry with the Necrontyr escalated into open conflict. The Necrontyr, driven by a deep-seated hatred for the Old Ones and their seemingly immortal mastery of life, sought a path to ultimate power. Their alliance with the Catan, entities formed from stellar energy, brought about their transformation into the Necrons. This new phase of the war in heaven introduced a foe that the Old Ones had never encountered before, one immune to their psychic manipulations and capable of striking with devastating technological precision. The Necrons' assault was relentless, but the Old Ones' ability to create sentient life gave them an advantage. They crafted allies such as the Eldar and the Crocs, designed to counter the Necrons' cold, methodical advance. Yet, this approach had a cost. The psychic connection of these new allies to the warp exacerbated its instability. The emotions of entire civilizations, rage, fear, hope, and despair, poured into the warp, creating a feedback loop that gave birth to the first warp entities. These fledgling entities, the precursors to the Chaos Gods, began to influence the material realm, adding another layer of chaos to an already volatile situation. As the warp became increasingly turbulent, it began to work against the Old Ones. Their mastery over this dimension, once a cornerstone of their power, became a liability. The psychic pathways they used to travel and communicate were now fraught with danger, and their enemies began to exploit these vulnerabilities. The Necrons, with their reliance on purely material technology, were unaffected by the warp's chaos. This allowed them to press their advantage, systematically dismantling the Old One's strongholds and forcing them into increasingly desperate positions. Adding to these challenges was the betrayal within the ranks of the Catan. These star-born entities were not a monolithic force. Their ambitions often clashed, and their hunger for power was insatiable. While some Catan worked in concert with the Necrons, others sought to consume their brethren or manipulate the Necrons for their own ends. This internal strife weakened the alliance between the Necrons and the Catan, but it also created unpredictable shifts in the battlefield dynamics, forcing the Old Ones to constantly adapt their strategies. The Old Ones' final undoing came from their greatest strength, their ability to create. The species they engineered, while powerful, were not infallible. The Eldar, for instance, were prone to emotional extremes that made them unpredictable allies. The Crocs, though resilient, lacked the cohesion to act as a unified force. These shortcomings were compounded by the warp's growing corruption, which began to infect even the Old Ones' most carefully designed creations. The beings they had once relied upon to protect their vision became liabilities, vulnerable to the insidious influence of the warp's emerging entities. Faced with insurmountable threats on all fronts, the Old Ones realized that their continued presence in the galaxy might lead to their complete annihilation. Their advanced technology and psychic prowess had allowed them to create wonders, but it could not shield them from the cumulative weight of the galaxy's growing chaos. Their decision to leave was not a surrender, but a strategic retreat, an acknowledgement that their time had passed and that their survival required stepping away from the galaxy they had shaped. The departure of the Old Ones was not the end of their story, but rather the beginning of a new chapter for the galaxy. The civilizations they left behind would struggle to fill the void, grappling with the consequences of their creators' ambitions and the dangers unleashed in their absence. The stage was set for an era of conflict and uncertainty, where the legacy of the Old Ones would be both a guiding light and a haunting shadow. The departure of the Old Ones unfolded over a series of critical stages, each marked by escalating pressures that forced their hand. While their influence once spanned the galaxy, their retreat was a gradual process, shaped by the interplay of cosmic events, existential threats, and their own dwindling resources. Each phase of this saga reveals the depth of their struggle and the profound impact of their absence on the galaxy they left behind. The earliest stage can be traced to the rise of the Necron-Tyre and their bitter rivalry with the Old Ones. The Necron-Tyre's hatred was born from the stark contrast between their own brief, painful lives and the seemingly immortal mastery of the Old Ones. This animosity boiled over into open war when the Necron-Tyre forged their fateful alliance with the C'tan. The Necron-Tyre's transformation into the Necrons marked a turning point, as their physical bodies were replaced with imperishable necrodermis, making them impervious to the Old Ones' psychic weapons. The war in heaven erupted, a conflict spanning countless millennia and consuming entire star systems. In its early stages, the Old Ones held the upper hand, relying on their unparalleled understanding of the warp and their ability to engineer new species as allies. However, as the war dragged on, cracks began to appear in their strategies. The Necrons, under the direction of the C'tan, deployed devastating technologies that nullified the Old Ones' psychic advantages. Worlds seeded with life by the Old Ones were systematically purged, turning thriving ecosystems into desolate wastelands. The second stage of the Old Ones' decline was defined by the warp's growing instability. As the psychic resonance of their creations increased, the warp, once a calm and navigable dimension, became a tempest of unchecked power. The emergence of the first warp entities marked the beginning of a new kind of warfare. These entities, born from the collective emotions of sentient beings, began to manifest in the material realm, disrupting the Old Ones' strategies and creating unforeseen threats. The warp, once their greatest tool, now turned against them, rendering their psychic pathways unreliable and their warp-based technologies increasingly hazardous. The third phase saw the Old Ones attempt to adapt to these mounting challenges. They accelerated the creation of new allies, crafting species with specific traits to counter the Necrons' advances. The Eldar, gifted with extraordinary psychic abilities, were among their most prominent creations, while the Crocs were designed for raw martial strength. These allies fought valiantly, but the escalating chaos of the warp began to take its toll. The Eldar, in particular, became increasingly susceptible to the warp's corruption, and the Crocs' lack of cohesion limited their effectiveness. The Old Ones were caught in a vicious cycle, their solutions giving rise to new problems that further eroded their position. The betrayal and fragmentation of the C'tan marked the fourth stage of this saga. The Necrons, recognizing the insatiable hunger of their star-born masters, turned against the C'tan, shattering them into shards. While this act weakened the Necrons' primary allies, it also destabilized the balance of power. The Necrons, now independent of the C'tan's influence, intensified their campaign against the Old Ones, using their advanced technology to devastating effect. Meanwhile, the C'tan shards, though diminished, remained a threat, introducing an additional layer of unpredictability to the conflict. The final stage of the Old Ones' departure was marked by their realization that continued resistance was futile. Their once vast empire had been reduced to isolated strongholds, besieged on all sides by the Necrons, warp entities, and the fallout of their own creation's instability. Facing the collapse of their civilization, the Old Ones began to withdraw. Some fled to hidden sanctuaries, possibly in dimensions beyond the warp, while others may have retreated to unexplored regions of the galaxy or even other galaxies entirely. This retreat was not immediate, but occurred over centuries, a gradual fading of their presence as they abandoned their remaining strongholds and severed ties with their creations. Their departure left behind a galaxy in chaos. The species they had nurtured were left to fend for themselves, struggling to adapt to a universe without their creator's guidance. The Necrons, having achieved their goal of toppling the Old Ones, entered stasis, awaiting a time when they could reclaim the galaxy. Meanwhile, the warp continued to grow in power, laying the foundation for the eventual rise of the Chaos Gods. The question of whether the Old Ones will return lingers as one of the great mysteries of the galaxy. Some believe they have merely withdrawn to rebuild their strength, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. Others argue that their retreat was final, a reluctant acknowledgement of their own limitations. Whatever the truth, the legacy of the Old Ones endures in the civilizations they left behind, the scars of the conflicts they waged, and the enduring questions about their fate. Their story is far from closed, and the echoes of their influence continue to shape the galaxy's future. The departure of the Old Ones reverberated across the galaxy, leaving an indelible mark on the civilizations, ecosystems, and fundamental structures of reality itself. Their absence not only created a power vacuum, but also set in motion a cascade of changes that would shape the galaxy for eons. The immediate consequences of their retreat were profound, altering the trajectories of countless species and ushering in an era of unparalleled turmoil. One of the most significant impacts was the destabilization of the warp. The Old Ones had long relied on the warp as a tool for their vast projects, using its energies to manipulate reality, create life, and connect the farthest reaches of the galaxy. However, their departure coincided with the warp's transformation into a volatile and hostile force. The psychic energies of their creations, combined with the catastrophic conflicts of the war in heaven, had already caused the warp to become a storm of chaos. Without the Old One's mastery to maintain balance, the warp's instability intensified. This set the stage for the emergence of powerful entities within the warp, beings that would later evolve into the Chaos Gods. The species left behind by the Old Ones also faced immediate challenges. The Eldar, one of the most powerful and psychically attuned races crafted by the Old Ones, were particularly affected. Without the guidance and protection of their creators, they were left to chart their own path in a galaxy that was increasingly hostile. The Eldar's innate connection to the warp made them both a potent force and a vulnerable target. Their civilization flourished for a time, but their unchecked arrogance and indulgence would eventually lead to their catastrophic downfall. The Crocs, another creation of the Old Ones, adapted in a very different manner. Left to their own devices, they devolved into the Orcs, a race of anarchic warriors driven by an instinctual need for conflict. While the Crocs had been engineered as a weapon of war, the Orcs became an ever-present scourge, their chaotic and decentralized nature ensuring their survival even in the most adverse conditions. Their emergence as a dominant force in the galaxy was a direct consequence of the Old Ones' absence, as there was no longer a guiding hand to temper their more destructive tendencies. The Necrons, having successfully driven the Old Ones into exile, found themselves in a peculiar position. Their victory in the war in heaven came at a great cost. The Necrontyre's transformation into the Necrons had stripped them of their souls and much of their individuality, leaving them as eternal servants of their ancient hatred. With their primary enemy gone, the Necrons faced a galaxy in chaos. Realizing that the galaxy was not yet ready for their dominance, they retreated into stasis, waiting for a time when they could awaken and claim what they saw as their rightful place. Beyond the immediate effects on sentient species, the ecosystems and planetary biospheres nurtured by the Old Ones suffered as well. Many of the worlds they had terraformed were ravaged during the war in heaven, their delicate balance disrupted by the massive energies unleashed during the conflict. Some of these planets became barren wastelands, while others were irreversibly altered, their environments twisted by the warp's encroachment. The Old One's vision of a galaxy filled with thriving ecosystems was left in ruins, with only fragmented remnants surviving in isolated pockets. The warp entities that emerged in the wake of the Old One's departure also had a profound impact. These nascent beings, born from the psychic emanations of sentient species, began to exert their influence on the material universe. Their presence further destabilized the galaxy as they sought to manipulate and corrupt those who were vulnerable to their whispers. The rise of these entities marked the beginning of a new era of strife, one in which the lines between the material and immaterial realms became increasingly blurred. Another consequence of the Old One's absence was the fragmentation of their knowledge. The advanced technologies and secrets of the Old Ones, once wielded to create and sustain life across the galaxy, were lost or scattered. Fragments of their knowledge survived in the hands of their creations, but much of it was misunderstood or misused. The Eldar retained some of their creators' psychic techniques, while the Necrons preserved their technological acumen, albeit twisted by their own purposes. Meanwhile, other species stumbled upon remnants of the Old One's legacy, incorporating these artifacts into their own development, often with unintended and disastrous results. The galaxy itself, once a tapestry of carefully orchestrated life and harmony, became a battleground. The absence of the Old Ones created a void that countless factions sought to fill. This power vacuum led to endless wars as species vied for dominance and survival in a galaxy bereft of the guiding hand that had once shaped its destiny. The rise of new empires, the fall of ancient civilizations, and the relentless cycle of conflict can all be traced back to the moment the Old Ones departed. In the grand tapestry of the galaxy's history, the immediate aftermath of the Old One's retreat is a chapter of upheaval and transformation. Their absence reshaped the galaxy in ways that continue to reverberate, influencing the rise and fall of empires, the evolution of species, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos. While their creations grappled with the consequences, the galaxy itself became a testament to their legacy, a monument to both their unparalleled achievements and the unintended destruction they left behind. The Old One's departure from the galaxy is intertwined with a web of unique aspects, both technological and metaphysical, that elevate their story beyond a mere historical event. Their mastery over the warp, their unprecedented achievements in the manipulation of life, and the enigmatic nature of their disappearance are all defining characteristics that distinguish their tale. These elements not only highlight the scope of their power, but also underscore the enduring mystery surrounding their fate. Central to understanding the Old Ones is their unparalleled ability to manipulate the warp. Unlike later civilizations, which often view the warp as a chaotic and dangerous realm, the Old Ones wielded its energies with precision. They used the warp to facilitate instantaneous travel across vast distances, enabling their influence to extend to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Their control over the Immaterium also allowed them to perform feats of creation that bordered on the miraculous, crafting new species and ecosystems tailored to thrive in specific environments. This deep understanding of the warp was both a gift and a curse, as it laid the groundwork for their ultimate downfall when the Immaterium began to spiral out of control. Another unique aspect of the Old Ones was their ability to engineer life on an unprecedented scale. They were not content to simply guide the development of existing species. They actively designed entirely new forms of life, imbuing them with traits that suited specific purposes. The Eldar, created to be psychically attuned, and the Crocs, engineered for brute strength, are prime examples of their craftsmanship. Yet the Old Ones' creations extended far beyond sentient beings. They shaped entire ecosystems, creating interconnected networks of life that reflected their vision of a harmonious galaxy. This intricate work was as much an art form as it was a science, demonstrating their unparalleled ability to merge biology with the warp's energies. The technology of the Old Ones remains another defining aspect of their legacy. Their creations, often referred to as artifacts or relics, defy comprehension even by the most advanced civilizations that followed. These devices were not merely tools, but extensions of their will, capable of reshaping matter, bending time, and even altering the laws of physics. Warp gates, vast portals that allowed for instantaneous travel, are among the most famous remnants of their technology. Many of these gates remain active even in the modern era, serving as silent monuments to their mastery. However, such technology also became a liability, as the instability of the warp eventually rendered many of these devices dangerous or unusable. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Old One's departure is the mystery surrounding their fate. Unlike the Necrons, who entered stasis to await a future resurgence, the Old Ones seem to vanish entirely. Their retreat raises questions about their ultimate destination. Some theories suggest they ascended to a higher plane of existence, leaving the material universe behind. Others propose that they withdrew to hidden dimensions within the warp, inaccessible to mortal understanding. The possibility that they fled to another galaxy introduces the idea that their work may continue elsewhere, beyond the reach of their original creations and adversaries. The Old One's deep connection to the warp also ties them to the rise of the first warp entities. These beings, which later evolved into the Chaos Gods, were an unintended consequence of the Old One's actions. Their creation's psychic energy, amplified by the conflicts of the war in heaven, catalyzed the birth of these entities. The Old Ones struggled to contain the growing instability of the warp, and the rise of these malevolent forces represents a unique challenge that no other civilization has faced to the same degree. This dynamic underscores the complexity of their role as both creators and unwitting instigators of chaos. Another unique aspect of their legacy is the way their influence persists despite their absence. The civilizations they created, the technologies they left behind, and the ecosystems they nurtured continue to shape the galaxy. The Eldar, for instance, still wield remnants of the psychic techniques imparted by the Old Ones, while the Necrons' hatred of their creators remains a driving force in their long-term plans. Even the warp gates, though largely forgotten or repurposed, serve as a testament to their enduring presence. These remnants act as both a gift and a curse, providing tools for survival while also serving as reminders of what was lost. The philosophical implications of the Old One's departure also set their story apart. Their decision to leave raises questions about the limits of power and the consequences of overreach. Despite their godlike capabilities, the Old Ones were ultimately unable to control the forces they had unleashed. This humbling realization, whether it came before or after their retreat, speaks to the precarious balance between creation and destruction. It also serves as a cautionary tale for those who might seek to emulate their achievements without understanding the full scope of their implications. Finally, the enigma of whether the Old Ones will ever return is perhaps the most unique aspect of their story. Their disappearance left a void that has never been filled, and their potential resurgence carries implications that could reshape the galaxy. If they were to return, would they seek to restore the order they once envisioned, or would they come back as different beings, shaped by their time in exile? This lingering uncertainty fuels speculation, making their story one of the most enduring mysteries in the galaxy's history. The uniqueness of the Old One's tale lies in the blend of their unmatched capabilities, the unintended consequences of their actions, and the enduring questions about their fate. Their legacy is not just a chapter in the galaxy's history, but a foundation upon which much of its current struggles and triumphs are built. Even in their absence, the Old Ones remain a force that continues to shape the destiny of the stars. The departure of the Old Ones and the events leading to their retreat involved a host of pivotal figures whose actions shaped the trajectory of this galaxy-spanning saga. These personalities ranged from the enigmatic leaders of the Old Ones themselves to the mortal and immortal agents of their downfall. Each played a role in this intricate drama, their legacies intertwined with the mystery of the Old One's fate and the galaxy's turbulent history. Foremost among these figures were the leaders and architects of the Old One's civilization. While their names and identities are lost to history, their actions speak volumes about their vision and influence. These beings, often described in ancient accounts as godlike in wisdom and power, were the architects of life itself, designing countless species and ecosystems. They were not mere rulers, but stewards of a galaxy-spanning project, balancing the intricate interplay of creation, governance, and warfare. They likely included master biologists, psychic savants, and strategists who orchestrated the vast endeavors of their kind. Despite their immense power, their failure to foresee the warp's corruption and the Necron's technological ascendancy underscores the complexity and tragedy of their role. The Necrontyre's transformation into the Necrons was driven by the will of Zarek, the Silent King. Zarek, the last ruler of the Necrontyre, made the fateful decision to ally with the C'tan, trading his people's fragile mortality for the promise of immortality. This act of desperation turned the tide of the war in heaven, transforming the Necrontyre into the soulless Necrons. As the Silent King, Zarek led the charge against the Old Ones, orchestrating a campaign of annihilation that ultimately drove them to retreat. Yet Zarek's story is also one of regret, as he would later rebel against the C'tan and shatter their dominion, signaling his enduring complexity as both a destroyer and a liberator. Among the C'tan, several figures played prominent roles in the downfall of the Old Ones. The Deceiver, known for its cunning and manipulative nature, was instrumental in turning the Necrontyre against the Old Ones. Through lies and half-truths, the Deceiver sowed discord and ensured the Necrontyre's loyalty to the C'tan. Another significant entity was the Nightbringer, whose insatiable hunger for life essence made it a devastating force on the battlefield. The Nightbringer's voracious appetite for destruction contributed significantly to the Necrons' campaign, leaving a trail of death and despair in its wake. These beings, despite their immense power, were eventually betrayed and shattered by the very forces they sought to control, a fate as ironic as it was catastrophic. From the perspective of the Old One's creations, several individuals rose to prominence during the war in heaven. Among the Eldar, there are legends of ancient seers and warriors who were instrumental in defending their creator's vision. Though their names have been lost to time, their deeds are etched into the psychic memory of their race. These early Eldar heroes wielded the immense psychic power granted by their creators, battling both Necrons and warp-spawned entities with equal fervor. Their sacrifices and victories laid the foundation for the Eldar's later ascension as a dominant galactic power, even as their creators faded into obscurity. The Crocs, precursors to the Orcs, also produced leaders of great renown, though their identities are similarly shrouded in myth. These figures, often depicted as larger-than-life warriors, were instrumental in uniting their chaotic kindreds to fight on behalf of the Old Ones. While their tactics were crude compared to the psychic finesse of the Eldar, their raw strength and resilience made them an invaluable asset in the war. These early Croc leaders, though long forgotten by history, represent the enduring legacy of their creators' intent to build beings capable of adapting to any challenge. The warp entities that emerged during this era also had key figures whose rise was intertwined with the Old One's downfall. Among these nascent beings, Khorne, Tsench, Nurgle, and Slaanesh were beginning to form from the psychic fallout of the galaxy's strife. Though not yet the fully realized gods of chaos, their early manifestations influenced the events of the time, feeding on the emotions and conflicts unleashed by the war in heaven. These proto-chaos entities, while not directly engaged with the Old Ones, thrived on the chaos that accompanied their retreat, cementing their future role as dominant forces in the Immaterium. Finally, the enigmatic Eldar figure known as Segorak, the Laughing God, may also have played a subtle role during this period. As one of the most elusive and enigmatic deities associated with the Eldar, Segorak's actions during the war in heaven remain speculative. Some legends suggest that Segorak, even then, foresaw the consequences of the Old One's departure and worked to preserve fragments of their knowledge through the webway. If true, this would make Segorak one of the few beings actively working to mitigate the long-term effects of their absence. The figures associated with the departure of the Old Ones reflect the complexity and scale of their story. From the godlike architects of the Old Ones themselves to the defiant leaders of their enemies and the champions of their creations, each played a role in shaping the galaxy's destiny. Their actions and legacies continue to resonate, shaping the narratives of those who came after and ensuring that the story of the Old Ones remains one of the most compelling mysteries in the galaxy's history. The departure of the Old Ones has left behind a legacy shrouded in unanswered questions and speculative theories. These lingering mysteries are more than mere historical curiosities. They are touchpoints for speculation, intrigue, and fear among the galaxy's inhabitants. From the true nature of the Old Ones to the reasons for their disappearance and the possibility of their return, these unresolved enigmas fuel endless debate. One of the most enduring questions concerns the ultimate fate of the Old Ones. While it is widely accepted that they retreated from the galaxy, their final destination remains unknown. Did they ascend to a higher plane of existence, transcending the physical universe entirely? Some scholars suggest that their advanced knowledge of the warp allowed them to create sanctuaries within its depths, hidden from the chaos they inadvertently unleashed. Others propose that they fled to another galaxy, abandoning their original creations to seek refuge and start anew. The lack of concrete evidence leaves room for endless speculation. The motivation behind their retreat also remains a matter of debate. Was their exodus a calculated act of survival, recognizing that their continued presence would only exacerbate the galaxy's instability? Or was it a desperate flight from forces that even they could not overcome? Some theories suggest that the rise of warp entities, early manifestations of what would become the Chaos Gods, played a greater role in their decision than previously believed. The warp's corruption may have reached a point where even the Old Ones, with all their power, could no longer control or navigate it safely. The role of the Necrons and the C'tan in their departure raises further questions. While it is clear that the war in heaven was a pivotal factor, the extent to which the Necrons understood the consequences of their actions is uncertain. Did the Silent King and his followers intend to drive the Old Ones from the galaxy entirely, or were they simply seeking to end their dominion over the stars? Furthermore, the betrayal and fragmentation of the C'tan add another layer of complexity. Did the Old Ones anticipate the Necrons' rebellion against their cosmic allies? And if so, why were they unable to exploit it to their advantage? Another unresolved mystery lies in the fate of the technologies and artifacts left behind by the Old Ones. While some of their creations, such as the warp gates and webway, remain functional, the true extent of their technological legacy is unknown. Ancient ruins scattered across the galaxy suggest that much of their knowledge has been lost, either destroyed in the war in heaven or hidden in locations inaccessible to later civilizations. These relics, when discovered, often defy understanding, raising the question of whether the Old Ones intentionally left behind clues to their existence or if these remnants are merely the detritus of a once great civilization. The psychic resonance of their creations is another area ripe for speculation. The Old Ones' manipulation of the warp and their role in shaping psychically attuned species like the Eldar had far-reaching consequences. Some argue that the psychic echo of their presence lingers in the warp itself, influencing events even in their absence. Others believe that certain warp phenomena, such as stable zones or unexplained disturbances, may be remnants of the Old Ones' work. Could these residual effects hold the key to understanding their ultimate goals, or are they simply byproducts of their vast and complex projects? The possibility of their return is one of the most tantalizing theories. Some believe that the Old Ones are not truly gone, but are merely waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. This belief is particularly prevalent among the Eldar, whose ancient myths often hint at a time when their creators will return to restore balance to the galaxy. However, the nature of such a return is itself a source of anxiety. Would the Old Ones come back as benevolent saviors, or would they view the galaxy's current inhabitants as a failure, worthy only of eradication and replacement? The connection between the Old Ones and the rise of the Chaos Gods is another unresolved issue. While their actions undoubtedly contributed to the warp's instability, the exact timeline and mechanisms remain unclear. Did the Old Ones foresee the emergence of these entities, and if so, did they attempt to counteract them? Some theorists suggest that the Old Ones' retreat may have been a deliberate strategy to deny the warp entities further sustenance, sacrificing their dominion over the galaxy to halt the growth of these nascent powers. If true, this raises questions about the effectiveness of their strategy and whether it has delayed or merely postponed the inevitable. Lastly, the legacy of the Old Ones is embedded in the species they created, but the full scope of their influence remains a mystery. Were there other sentient races, long extinct or forgotten, that the Old Ones engineered and used in their wars? If so, what became of them? The scattered remnants of these lost species, if they exist, could hold vital clues about the Old Ones' broader plans and their vision for the galaxy. Similarly, the genetic and psychic imprints left on surviving species, such as the Eldar and Orcs, may contain hidden codes or messages waiting to be unlocked. The unanswered questions surrounding the Old Ones elevate their story from ancient history to an enduring enigma. Each fragment of their legacy, each unexplained phenomenon tied to their actions, serves as a puzzle piece in a narrative that spans millions of years. While their creations, their enemies, and even the galaxy itself grapple with the consequences of their departure, the ultimate truth about the Old Ones remains tantalizingly out of reach. Whether they will ever return to provide those answers, or whether they left them scattered among the stars, waiting to be discovered, remains one of the greatest mysteries of the cosmos. The long-term consequences of the Old Ones' departure have reverberated through the galaxy for millions of years, shaping its very fabric and defining the trajectory of countless civilizations. Their absence created a void that no other power has managed to fill, leading to cycles of conflict, upheaval, and transformation. The galaxy's current state, marked by perpetual warfare, the dominance of chaos, and the fractured remnants of ancient empires, is as much a product of their disappearance as it is of the forces that drove them away. One of the most profound and enduring effects has been the destabilization of the warp. The Old Ones' manipulation of the Immaterium was both their greatest tool and their ultimate downfall. Their departure allowed the nascent warp entities, born of the psychic resonance of the galaxy's sentient species, to grow unchecked. Over time, these entities coalesced into the Chaos Gods, whose influence now pervades both the warp and the material realm. The chaos and corruption unleashed by these entities have become a defining feature of the galaxy, driving endless conflict and thwarting attempts at unity and stability. The civilizations created by the Old Ones have also been deeply affected by their absence. The Eldar, once the favored children of their creators, rose to prominence in the wake of the Old Ones' retreat, but ultimately fell victim to their own hubris and unchecked psychic power. Their empire's collapse, marked by the birth of Slaanesh, exemplifies the unintended consequences of the Old Ones' legacy. The Orcs, descendants of the Crocs, remain a chaotic and destructive force, their engineered resilience and adaptability ensuring their survival even as their creator's purpose for them is long forgotten. These species, along with countless others influenced by the Old Ones, continue to grapple with the implications of their creator's designs. The power vacuum left by the Old Ones' departure has shaped the galaxy's political and military landscape. The Necrons, having succeeded in their war against the Old Ones, retreated into stasis, leaving behind ancient tomb worlds scattered across the stars. Their reawakening in the modern era has reintroduced a powerful and enigmatic force to the galactic stage, one whose motivations and goals are deeply intertwined with their ancient conflict. Meanwhile, other civilizations have risen and fallen in the absence of the Old Ones' stabilizing influence, with empires and factions vying for dominance in a galaxy defined by fragmentation and strife. The technological legacy of the Old Ones continues to play a significant role in the galaxy's evolution. The artifacts and relics they left behind, warp gates, webway passages, and other enigmatic devices, are both prized and feared. These remnants of their civilization serve as both a reminder of their unparalleled mastery and a source of potential power for those who can unlock their secrets. Yet, the misuse or misinterpretation of this technology often leads to catastrophe, as later civilizations lack the understanding necessary to wield it responsibly. This paradox has made the Old One's technological legacy a double-edged sword, both advancing and imperiling those who seek to harness it. On a broader scale, the Old One's departure has had a lasting impact on the galaxy's philosophical and spiritual outlook. Their absence has fueled countless myths, legends, and prophecies among the species they influenced. For the Eldar, the Old Ones are revered as gods and saviors, their return often depicted as a time of renewal and salvation. For others, they are enigmatic figures whose motives and actions remain beyond comprehension. This diverse range of interpretations underscores the enduring influence of their legacy on the cultural and spiritual identities of the galaxy's inhabitants. The long-term consequences of their departure are also evident in the structure of the galaxy itself. The interconnected systems of warp gates and webway passages, remnants of the Old One's design, continue to define the boundaries of exploration and expansion. These pathways, while invaluable, are also fraught with danger, as the corruption of the warp has made many of them unstable or outright deadly. The reliance on these ancient systems underscores the galaxy's dependence on the relics of a civilization long gone, highlighting the absence of comparable innovation in the millennia since. The question of whether the Old Ones will return remains a source of both hope and dread. If they were to come back, their arrival would undoubtedly reshape the galaxy in ways that are impossible to predict. Would they seek to restore the balance they once envisioned, or would they view the galaxy's current state as irredeemable, necessitating its destruction and reconstruction? The mere possibility of their return casts a shadow over the galaxy's future, a reminder that their influence is far from extinguished. In the grand scheme of the galaxy's history, the Old One's departure stands as a turning point, a moment when the balance of power shifted irreversibly. Their retreat marked the end of an era of creation and stewardship, ushering in an age of conflict and chaos that continues to this day. Yet, even in their absence, their legacy endures, shaping the destiny of the stars and the civilizations that inhabit them. The long-term consequences of their actions and their departure serve as a testament to their unparalleled significance, ensuring that their story will remain a central chapter in the galaxy's saga for millennia to come.